So let me.
I
Okay,
got you.
great.
Took
We're
care of you.
recording. Well, first of all, welcome everybody to a producer spotlight from the Harvard Extension, Creative Writing and Creative Writing and Literature Student Society. It's always such a tongue twister, such a literary tongue twister. So tonight's guest is not a member of the ecosystem of the Harvard Extension system per se, but you might call him one by extension. Him and I had the good fortune of working together over 7 years ago in a project called Dave Made a Maze, which was a film that we, as an advisor to a film production company, belongs to a very good friend of mine. He found the opportunity to go into this project, and this project which it really became something fascinating to us because of the story, because of how this script, this screenplay, this story, and this sign had been turned into this fascinating movie, which was part horror, parts comedy, sci-fi, a little bit of everything. And so I thought it would be really interesting, and I'm very grateful to Art Foster, Kat Vorak, and Natalie Zender, the members of the board of the Creative Writing Society, for giving us the opportunity to bring this experience of Dave Made a Maze, and find and analyze with John Charles, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, actionable experiences and actionable advice for any and every person who is thinking of writing a screenplay, or has already developed a screenplay and is saying, well, what now? How do I take this the next step? Like, how do I produce it? I'm getting started, or maybe I have a book and I have this great idea, but I want to take it to the next step. Well, John is not a writer. Originally, he is an actor. So he does come from the arts, and he made that jump, and he produced this incredible movie. And what I wanted to do is, well, first of all, right now, introduce him, John Charles Meyer. He was the producer for Dave Made a Maze. Welcome to the program.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Okay, so a little bit about him. So I have what your electric EPK says. You spent your 20s in DC political media, in a political media firm, while touring the United States with a rock band, and then you had some acting experience in more of a dozen TV series, including Hawaii Five-O, Mom, Lucifer, Vampire Diaries, Anger Management. So you definitely had a solid experience in some very interesting and top of the line comedy shows, right? And then you decided to take this step into production. So what made you take that step? Like, what was it that triggered that curiosity to go into production?
In a word, boredom. You control very little of your own destiny as an actor. There are lots of things you can do to hustle. There are lots of things you can do to keep exercising the muscle in small ways, theater for sure, and also short films and student films and low budget features. You can get your sort of fingers in lots of different pies. But at the end of the day, a very, very busy actor might only be working 1 or 2 days a month. And that leaves a lot of time, a lot of downtime to not be doing much. I now have 2 toddlers and essentially 2 other day jobs. So I don't have that time in my hands anymore. But 15 years ago, I found myself getting antsy over the fact that I just didn't have a project to work on during downtime. And I got invited into sort of the producer's circle on a crappy B movie, monster movie that I was an actor in. They sort of said, hey, we'll give you a credit if you can help us with X, Y, and Z. And I did, and I enjoyed it, and I thought I was halfway decent at it. So I grabbed the next couple of opportunities that came along. And at some point, I found myself looking for a project to helm on my own, and that became Dave Made a Maze.
Okay, fascinating. So it's it's kind of a different ordeal where I guess one can't really generalize, but writers do spend hours on end writing and writing and writing, but the productive aspect of getting their story sold or getting their story published is is really also very a lot of work for very little moments of actual retribution or actual productivity. So I guess we can relate to that. Well, congratulations on taking the step on producing Dave Made a Maze. For those of you, I think most of the people in this chat group have already seen the movie. Those of you who haven't, this is a movie that was released at Slam Dance in 2017. For those of you who don't know Slam Dance, it is a festival that runs concurrently with the Sundance Film Festival in Park City, Utah, and it is a film focused on independent filmmaking. And it won the award for Best Feature Film, the Audience Award for Best Feature Film, and it went on to win. Could you give us a little overview, John?
Yeah, we played 63 festivals in 26 countries. We took home the top prize, best feature, essentially. I mean, they word it differently, but top prize essentially at 12 of them in 7 countries.
So this was really a wonderful story, and so this must have been quite a thrill and quite a ride. And again, one of the reasons why I thought it would be interesting to share with these up and coming students of the art of filmmaking in at Harvard Extension. So a little bit of the synopsis of the movie before we go into the first part of the interview, which we're going to talk about the creative process. So the story is the following: Dave, who's an artist like all of us, who has yet to complete, well, most of us have completed something significant in our careers. Dave, who is the protagonist of Dave Made a Maze, has yet to complete anything significant in his career. And so he builds a fort in his living room out of pure frustration, only to wind up trapped by the fantastical pitfalls, booby traps, and critters of his own creation. Ignoring his warnings, Dave's girlfriend, Annie, leads a band of oddball explorers on a rescue mission. And once inside, they find themselves trapped in an ever-changing supernatural world, threatened by booby traps and pursued by a bloodthirsty minotaur. So this is a really interesting and really fun movie to watch. So let's talk about a little bit about the creative process. So John, what inspired the concept of Dave Made a Maze? What can you tell us about that? How did the idea evolve from screenplay into your hands and into a production?
Sure. So the writer was Steve Sears, and the director was Bill Watterson. Bill and I have known each other since we were 14 years old. And he and Steve were also friends. I didn't really know Steve at the time, or very ancillarily, if I did at all. Anyway, Steve had written a horror screenplay, sort of I want to make something with my friends. What's the cheapest, easiest genre I can come up with to do so, to get something off the ground. And it was called The Maze. And he started telling Bill about it one day when the two of them were hanging out. And Bill was looking for a project to direct. And somehow Bill got onto a story about how when he was a kid, he had built a maze-like fort when he was like 10 years old in his bedroom, and thought it was the most epic fort he'd ever built at 10 years old, and left a note for his mom saying, went to Jimmy's house for dinner, please don't touch my fort. His mom came home, didn't see the note on the kitchen table, got scared that he had been trapped or lost inside the maze that he had built for himself, and proceeded to tear it apart, which Bill was then devastated by. He told this story to Steve. 3 days later, Steve came back to him, having completely scrapped the horror screenplay and written the first 60 pages of what eventually became Dave Made a Maze, which has horror elements to it, but is by no means a standard horror film. It's much more of a comedy adventure. And how did it end up in my lap? Bill and I have known each other for, like I said, decades, and he knew I was looking for a project to produce, to helm. He was looking for a project to direct, and he said, hey, this guy Steve wrote this thing. I think it's really cool. What do you think? And he just sort of gave me the pitch, and I was like, I love that. That sounds amazing. And that's really kind of how it happened. I mean, I actually sort of warned Gustavo before this interview that I wasn't going to have any deep thoughts on how best to pitch a screenplay to somebody, because I'd like to say it happened quickly. It didn't happen quickly. It took us 4 years to get from that yes to production, and another 1.5 years to get to our world premiere. It's not a fast process, but the process of getting the screenplay to a quote unquote producer, who at the time had no sole producing credits, who was interested in getting the film made, was pretty much that simple. A couple of friends talking about it.
Well, I mean, once you look back at it, you can say, oh, it's simple. A bunch of friends that got together and talked about it. But how many times, some friends talk about projects and talk about ideas, and nothing comes out of it. And so, I think that what is remarkable as well about how this came together is, and a big lesson to take here is that sometimes there doesn't need to be this elaborate story of how things came together. All you have to do is keep at it. If you have a good idea, and if you have a good a good group of friends who are working and who have the similar like-minded goals, you just have to keep the communication flowing and keep the exchange of ideas, and that's how things begin, and that's how things take off. So in the simplicity of your story, there is a big lesson. There doesn't need to be an elaborate trip or an elaborate visit to some agent or whatever. No, sometimes things do happen organically. It is possible to take something and make something beautiful, starting as a group of friends in a student society that are exchanging ideas, or in a classroom exchanging ideas. It is possible to take it from one level to the next.
And I think it's also worth pointing out that we three friends really didn't know shit from Shinola when it came to getting this film to the finish line. When we first had these conversations, I was probably the most informed of the three of us in terms of what my job would be, and I still really didn't know what I was doing. So, well, to some degree, it's just nose to the grindstone and figure it out for yourself,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that's another really important thing. It's what you need to do is what we artists, and I'm wearing the hat of the artist here, what I need to do is really believe in the project, and believe in what you're doing. And in this case, I really didn't know that story about the tent, and it is true that Dave Made a Maze is first and foremost a comedy. So I had a specific question for you regarding that. Comedy adventure, because I think there's obviously and definitely a good mixture of comedy and adventure, which I think is so special and unique to this type of movie. So the balance between comedy and adventure. So how did you guys approach maintaining this balance, as you were thinking or imagining the movie in the production process?
I don't think we overthought how to approach things. The script spoke for itself. I had a lot of people ask me, for your first feature as lead producer, sort of taking the reins, why not do a $40,000 three adults in a single apartment mumblecore relationship drama or comedy or whatever? And my simple answer to that question time and time again was, this is going to be a multiple year process, and I don't want to be bored out of my mind 6 months in. I didn't see something like that holding my interest. And this script, Dave Made a Maze, I really didn't know at the outset how we were going to do what we were setting out to do. I really didn't know how we were going to get from point A to point B, but I knew that I loved the script and I loved just sort of the whimsy and weirdness of it, and the fact that it was something I'd never seen before. So yeah, I mean, I think the script really just spoke for itself, and we let it do that all the way through. We didn't overthink how are we going to try to fit this into a box or fit this into a genre. We got asked a lot when we pitched investors. I got asked a lot when I pitched investors, what genre is this? And I fumbled that early on, and eventually started to learn that there was some value in straddling genres. You will be told by a lot of distributors and a lot of producers and a lot of studios that you got to fit in a box in order to be able to sell something. And maybe you won't be told that as much today as you would have been told that 10 years ago, but I heard it a lot. And we just kind of wore it on our sleeve that this was not an easily pigeonholable film. It does have hot comedy elements. It does have horror elements. It is sort of an action adventure in some weird way. And we just did our best to make that a positive and not a negative.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you did. So with regards to that moment of transforming the screenplay. So I see there's we'll be fielding all, or we'll be answering all of the questions that are coming up in the chat. We'll get to distribution and festivals a little further on. But there's one everybody's asking about the origami, and everybody.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to do stuff along the way too if you want. It's up to you. It's your gig.
So and I think, no, I mean, and the origami, and the, it has to do with design, and which is part of what we're talking about now. So what kind of, I was wondering if you could share with us some anecdotes or moments that could embody the collaborative spirit of the filmmaking team, and maybe the origami, or an example of a successful collaboration between the screenwriter and the producer during this project, and maybe creating creating this maze, creating these origamis. Could we talk about the set design, for example?
Sure. I mean, the art department was everything to this film, both in terms of warm bodies getting things done, and also in terms of why this film is successful. And so anytime we had anybody show up on set, paid or unpaid, to say, how can I help today? Or what do you need me to do today? The answer was always, go to the art department, go to the art department, go to the art department. The writer, Steve, was on set every single day and pretty much did nothing but art department the entire time he was there. I spent a lot of my time hunched over a computer getting yelled at by agents and pulling my hair out over contracts, and the fact that we couldn't get any of the trades to take us seriously for production stories and anything else. But when I did get a break, I picked up a hot glue gun and some scissors, and I cut up paper and ripped cardboard and glued stuff. And that's what everybody was doing all the time. We had 26 sets in this film, all of which were handmade. And the room that we were, a warehouse, essentially. It was not really a stage, but the warehouse that we filmed it in was only big enough to hold about 3 of those sets at a time. So the art department was racing the camera crew every single day of production. We basically split the room between camera team and actors on one side and art department team on the other side. And you would hear, all right, camera rolling, quiet on the set. And 20 people with glue guns would go, and just have to stand still for 45 seconds until they cut the scene, or what, 2 minutes or whatever it was. And then as soon as we yelled cut, there were all manner of, hammers and saws and glue guns and everything else going nuts. That really was one of the biggest challenges we faced the whole time, was just keeping art department ahead of camera crew. And there was one day when we failed to do that, where the production just ground to a halt because the particular set was so complicated that our department wasn't able to stay ahead of the curve. And so we just stopped for about 4 hours, which was terrifying.
Yeah. Wow. So okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously the art department and the screenwriter was always was there, you know, looking and working hand in hand, then in conclusion with the art department to ensure that there was that the so the screen so that the screenplay was indeed a faithful was or that the art department was being faithful to the screenwriter. So what did it evolve? Did the screenplay evolve at all during production because of the realities and the challenges of the production itself?
Yeah, and actually, before I move on to that, I want to say one other thing about the experience on set and sort of the collaborative nature of it, the sort of artistic nature of it. I can't take credit for this at all. I think this was just this film and the extent to which it needed to be, and we allowed it to be weird and creative and an opportunity for anybody with a cool idea to come up with something, because there were things that were not explicitly written in the script that just came out of the art department at the last minute. You know, hey, what if we do this? And there were visuals that would not exist in the movie had we exclusively solely relied on the script. And giving people the leash to do that was crucial, I think. And because we did that, I have, over the last 9 years since we shot the film, run into crew member after crew member who tells me, man, you guys paid crap, but that was the most fun I've ever had on a set. I heard that over and over and over again. We really did pay them crap, but yeah, everybody had a good time on that film. So the rearrangement of the story, the order of scenes changed pretty significantly from script to screen. But the overall story that's being told stayed mostly intact. That said, there was an entire scene which was written after production had wrapped. We had done a rough cut of the film, done sort of a friends and family screening, and it was determined essentially that we were missing something. Something needed to be added. If you've seen the film, that's the puppet scene that was not in the original script that we shot.
Okay.
That was written after the fact and shot many, many months later. So, and as far as, you know, what was the process through the editing room, I mean, to a large degree, it was Bill and our editor, David Egan, pretty much just doing everything on their own until they got to a point where they were like, okay, let's show this to some folks. And we did some friends and family screenings, and we got some really valuable feedback that they then, you know, took back to the drawing board and sometimes made pretty significant changes to what they were doing because of the feedback they were getting. I'm a pretty big believer in staying in your lane in this business. I think it's pretty important. Everybody has an opinion, and producers especially like to put their stink on things, but and there's certainly nothing wrong with speaking your mind. I like to say my piece, but at the end of the day, in the editing room, it's the director and editor who should be making the decisions, and not a team of, you know, 10 other people or 5 other people or what have you. So
Yeah, that was going to be my next. I mean, and you did touch upon it. I mean, I have a lot of screenplay, a lot of screenwriter friends who say that, you know, like a movie. I've never finished writing a screenplay until I go into the editing room. I mean, the editing room really is the place where I finish my screenplay. And so this was how much was this the case in Dave Minamace? It definitely seems like it was. The whole one of the most fascinating scenes of the movie came out of after the fact. That's really interesting. So I guess the answer is a resounding yes in this case. You know, the editing really did make was really an important element in the creation of the final story that came out from the project, right?
100%. And I mean, with the exception of that one extra scene that was written in, and which is sort of one of the better and funnier and more crucial scenes in the film at the end of the day. But with the exception of that scene, really the story that was being told didn't change a heck of a lot, but the arrangement of scenes changed considerably.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fascinating. So after you go through that experience, after you have this amazing bonding experience, which is amazing. That's the beauty of independent film as well. You know, where we can, you can take those liberties and really provide, an experience. I see Dave Made a Maze as a really as a collaborative, and it shows, in a collaborative experience where people really express their artistic opinions. Like you mentioned with the art department providing fresh ideas. Now let's take a step back. You were the producer. So after all that artistic freedom was given, it became your turn to put on your hat and go out and sell this. So what factors, when you were done with this, you thought were most appealing for investors and for pitching the project?
After we'd shot it, or before
after you shot it, yes.
So yeah, so we basically raised just enough money to shoot it, with the idea that once we had the film in the can, we would have footage that we could cut together and try to go out and get more investors. That worked to a degree. One also has to consider the fact that I exhausted pretty much all of the people I knew who might give us money before we shot it. So there was a limited pool of people to go to for the first time with footage. But ultimately, we ended up getting to the finish line with the money, and some of that came from the production company that Gustavo was advising at the time. Sorry, the question was.
So the question was, in your opinion, is what made the project marketable? So when the time came to pitch it, that what were the strengths of the movie as a product? Like
the thing that has made this movie endure, the thing that has made this movie a little bit of an indie cult hit, is the art department, is the visuals, is the visual world that came out of the script that was written. Nobody, if you look at the reviews, if you talk to an audience coming out of a screening of this film, nobody's really commenting on the acting. Nobody's really commenting on the cinematography. Nobody's really commenting on much of anything else that you frequently hear reviews and stories about movies commenting on. What people comment on is the art. And the script described that art, and I didn't have any idea how that we were going to pull that off. I mean, if you look at the page, it's there on the page, but I read the page and I was like, I don't know how we do this. I don't know how this works. But we gave it to some people who did know, and they executed, and it made all the difference in the world. That's not to take anything away from the acting, the cinematography, the direction, anything else that went into this film. Everybody worked very hard on this film, and I'm very happy with everything that everybody turned in. But what makes this movie, I think, is the visuals. And that was the case for investors too, people seeing some of these scenes and really.
So with regards to with regard to the financials and the commercial potential of the project, it was the artistic liberties that were given became the biggest asset of the movie, and therefore it became the biggest selling point as you went on. Is that a safe conclusion to make?
Yeah, I think so.
So okay, that's beautiful. That's fantastic. So moving on then, with regards to as we know, then this is when we met. The movie premiered in 2017 in Slamdance in Utah. So and there's a question from our audience about that. Could you talk a little bit about the process of how you succeeded in sending the movie out to film festivals? Like, what were your strategies? Could you share some of your war stories and some of your battle wounds, while going in the film festival field, circuit?
Sure. First of all, I could talk distribution till we're all blue and dead. It's one of my favorite topics to rant about, and I will definitely get to that. But festivals, We had one investor, one of our larger investors, kind of pressure us a little bit to get to the finish line a little sooner. This investor was a little antsy that we were taking too long in post-production and wanted us to submit to film festivals with a not quite completed film. And we did that. When I say not quite completed, I mean there was actually an entire scene that had not yet been filmed. That's quite incomplete. Suffice it to say, we didn't have a score, we didn't have color correction. There was a lot missing from the film. And Slamdance, God bless them, saw the weirdness and the fun in this film and saw what was already there. And they invited us to come have our world premiere at their festival, and we loved doing so. That said, I'm not sure I would do it that way again. I think I probably would have tried a little harder to push back on this investor and say, look, we want to wait until the finished film is ready to send out. And if that means missing a deadline and waiting until next year, then so be it. But I didn't have the chops or the confidence, I think, at the time to do that. So fine. Once you've had a festival premiere, once you've lined up your first festival, and that can take a while to do. I've produced other films and other shorts and things that it can take quite a few tries to land your first one. But once you've gotten that first one, especially if it is relatively well received, either by the press or by the audiences, or, God bless them, by an award, then a lot of other festivals tend to fall in line. They may not all be big festivals, they may not all be important festivals, but a lot of them will fall in line. As I said at the beginning, I think we did 63 festivals in 23 countries. And I think we sent out applications for 10 festivals, maybe, of which 5 we didn't get into. So only 5 of the 63 were ones that we applied to and got into. There were 5 that we applied to and didn't get into. And then there were 58, I guess, that just said, hey, I heard about you from Slamdance, from the Florida Film Festival, from Sitges in Spain, from, Busan in South Korea. And, we heard great things and we'd love to invite you, or could you send a viewing link or whatever? And then you send an electronic link and they look at it and they go, yeah, we want to have your film. And especially with the foreign film festivals, there tends to be a screening fee in there too. So they'll reach out to you, they'll say, could we see a link? And then when they see the link, they like the film. Then you say, hey, could you give us whatever, this was 10 years ago, 8 years ago, but $300, $500 per screening. And most of them are willing to do that. So that's a little bit of an income stream early on. Distribution is a completely different animal. And I would love to talk about it at length, but just very briefly, what I will say is, if you are willing to put in the work to do at least some elements of the distribution yourself, my best advice is to do so. The companies that distribute non-studio films operate under horribly opaque accounting practices that border on, in my opinion, the criminal. I had been down this road a couple of times with a couple of other films prior to Dave Made Amaze's release, and I was determined that we were going to get a reputable company that, released real titles, that, was not just a bottom feeder, terrible indie distributor. And in theory, we did that, and we got treated exactly the same way. I loathe both of the companies that we have gotten in bed with. One of them is likely declaring bankruptcy later this year and probably going to cost us tens of thousands of dollars in doing so. And the other, I have no proof of any criminal activity from, but I'm wildly, wildly unimpressed with what they have pulled off, and feel very strongly that we could have done better on our own. Would as many people have seen the film had we done it on our own? Maybe not. But would we have brought in more money for our investors and our team and our crew had we done it on our own? Unquestionably. Indie distributors don't care about your film 1% as much as you care about your film. So if you can figure out how to navigate airline distribution, VOD distribution, VOD conglomerates, that's not the right word. What's the word I'm looking for? Aggregators, or theatrical screenings on your own. And all of those things I've discovered in the past 7 years are very possible. Then do it. Don't hand your film over to somebody else. And if you have to hand your film over to somebody else, make sure that the accounting is as transparent as you can possibly make it in the contract, and make the contract as short term as possible. Those are both pretty tough asks, because most of these companies are going to tell you no to both of those things. But man, stick by your guns. If they want your film, stick by your guns. Distributors, that's independent distribution.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're still working on different ideas, and to
We're going to get there eventually. We're more than halfway there, but more than halfway to $400,000 after 75 countries is.
And one way of getting there, which is what I'd like to steer, and these situations are not too different from the ones that somebody who publishes a book is going to go through. You publish a book, and you never know really when you're going to see your money back. But there is one aspect that this movie has, and which everyone who goes into the creative arts should strive to have, and is this cult following, and it's this faithful group of fans, loyal fans of the movie, because that are so committed, and so I'm going to use the word obsessed, but in the best positive way, about every aspect of this movie. Really created a legacy content here, and I wanted to talk a little bit, to sort of to gear towards the end, because we here at the Harvard Extension, a creative society, we decided that we really wanted to. We have a couple of fans of the movie here. I know Kat, for example, when I mentioned this movie, it's like, oh, they've made a maze. I've seen that movie. I love that movie, and so there's a lot of fans out here. So could you and how are we going to move forward? Could you talk a little bit about the phenomenon that it's been for the fans and around the world? Could you give us a little bit about that?
The only thing that I don't handle is our social media. The director still does that. He still does our Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So he's a little more attuned to sort of fan feedback and reaction, but I get to see a fair amount of it on the feeds. And one of the most unexpected and gratifying and bizarre things that has come out of this movie is the level of fan art, whether it's paintings or drawings or mazes or little mini films and whatever. What are the things that kids make for third grade projects with the little, not a mobile, in the little box? I can't think of it. Just crazy fan art that we keep putting up on social media. And a pipe dream of mine is to turn it into a book, which I want to call Dave Made a Book About a Movie About a Maze That Dave Made. But I don't know if we're ever going to get around to that. I mean, look, we couldn't have predicted this. We couldn't have even dreamed of this, but it's been a fun little side effect of the film.
Yeah, well, I think everybody here in the society is very happy to welcome you into the creative writing world, or into the book publishing world. So on that note, I don't know if there are any other questions that
I can take a look through the chat real quick too.
Yeah. Oh, we have
one person asked about origami. Why so much origami crew? Well, first of all, they were all volunteer. We did a pizza party and just invited people to come fold origami, and some of them didn't even know how to do it. So there were 30 or 40 people on that list, and some of them might have folded 2 cranes in the 2 hours that it took them to eat some pizza. But also, the origami kind of got buried in the scene where it was primarily used. There was lots of just balls of paper and streams of paper. And when you look at the final picture, you go, really? They had 1,000 pieces of origami for this? Doesn't look like they had 1,000 pieces of origami. It looks like they had 20, but there were 1,000. Somebody asked how many days it took. We shot, principal photography was 20 days. And then we had 4 days without actors, 1 for the puppet, 1 for the zoetrope, and 2 for the sort of gears and miniatures and stuff like that. 26 sets, yeah. Artists of all different backgrounds and skill sets. I just want to comment on a lot of the people we got because of our production designer, co-production designer, Trisha Gum, who was had spent several years at Robot Chicken. A lot of our art department crew came from Robot Chicken or came from people that they knew. And they sort of put their tendrils out to other people who might be good for this particular project. And one of them was a guy who came down from San Francisco and had previously been part of something called the Cardboard Institute of Technology, which is a real thing and was a real boon for us to find somebody like that. Do you think the producer should have final say or the director? Wow, that is a big, big question. I think it depends is the best answer. And most of the time I would say the director. The producer, in my opinion, is best if he or she is essentially the CEO. Maybe that's not the best example or best way to phrase it. Look, it varies by medium too. In television, an executive producer can have much, much more say and much, much more responsibility and power than, for example, in an independent film. Creatively speaking, execution wise, I think the director should be the one calling the shots. I think the producer should facilitate those decisions. When the director says, you know, I need a helicopter crane shot and this, that, and the other thing, the producer can say, F you, we don't have the money for that. But when the director says, I want it to look like this, or I want it to be released this way, you know, whenever possible, the producer should try to make that happen. But it's a much bigger question than just that. You pick those festivals. I mean, largely the festivals picked us. I can't think of an example of a festival that we turned down. Certainly there were festivals that we put more energy and effort and attendance into than others. But if somebody came calling and said, we want to screen your film, I guess I shouldn't say we didn't say no to any, because there were a few that we said, hey, could we get a nominal screening fee? And they just said, we can't afford to do that at all. And depending on the audience, depending on whether it was domestic, maybe we would be okay with that. But if it was a foreign festival or something with any kind of, you know, history to it, then usually we would insist on that. And I think there were a couple that fell away because of that, but largely they found us. Creative accounting was definitely a play inside the distributors. It's with this company that's about to declare bankruptcy, I really think it's going to come out that there was criminal activity going on. I'm a part of an email group of 20 or 30 other filmmakers who are getting burned by this same company. And a couple of them have already gotten their rights back and switched to services where they actually have eyeballs on the accounting, and they're literally getting 5x the returns that they were getting through this distributor, which is crazy. You know, I mean, you're talking about a film that's now 2 years old and all of a sudden it's getting 5 times as many downloads. That's criminal. Sorry, I can stop here. I'm just trying to get through this. What was the biggest emotional challenge you faced? The biggest emotional challenge I faced, me personally, I would say the 3 years that it took to raise the financing. I'm somebody who likes to make lists of things to do and tick things off that list as I get through it, through the day or through the year or whatever. And raising the financing for this film essentially involved calling 800 people I knew and pitching them on the film and having 17 of them say yes. And that's how we got the money for the film. And that literally took me 2.5 years to do. And so there were months that would go by without a single extra dollar in our bank account, which is to say without anything accomplished. And that was emotionally exhausting. It's one thing to get down your list of people, but it's another thing entirely to get down a list of to-do items. And I just wasn't doing that. I was calling person after person after person after person and just striking out again and again and again. And that was emotionally pretty tough. What do you recommend for distribution for a social justice expository documentary? I mean, that can mean a lot of different things, but I would say the extent to which you have a niche, lean into that. Find the organizations that will care about your film, find the organizations that will want to see your film, and contact them directly. Offer them a screening, whether that means you figure out the logistics of the local art house theater and you just say to them, hey, can you help us sell the tickets and we'll give you a cut of the sale? Or you say to them, hey, do you want to set up a screening of your own and just pay us a flat fee and show it to your membership? But find the people who are going to care about your film based on its topic. That's one way in which I think documentaries have a slight advantage. I mean, you can have a really tiny niche and then there's only so many people who want to see it. But if it's a topic that you're going to find groups in city after city that revolve around that topic, embrace it, lean into that. Distribution in theaters is a lot of work, but it is much more doable than distributors would have you believe. I'll tell another quick story before I finish this last one. Our domestic distributor had a meeting with us a couple months before we were going to have our release. And by contract, they were only required to give us 3 cities, one week screening in 3 cities. Ultimately, we ended up having 1 week screenings in 31 markets, which was awesome. Largely due to festival buzz. But before all that happened, I said to them, hey, I've got a buddy who runs an art house theater in a crappy little town. It's not a market you guys are ever going to be in. Would you mind if I set up a single night screening to in that theater before our official release? And the distributor was kind of like, go away, kid, you bother me. Like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. Do what you want. We don't care. And I ended up booking 18 screenings at 18 different venues in 18 different towns, 10 of which I attended, all of them prior to our official release. The 31 cities that we played for a full week grossed a little bit less than $50,000 domestically, of which we, the filmmakers, saw $0, not $1. I booked us 18 single night screenings, which grossed us $8,000, of which we kept $3,000. $3,000 isn't going to pay back my investors and my crew, but 3 out of 8 beats the hell out of 0 out of 50. If that's not a demonstration of how distribution can be better handled by yourself than by someone else, I don't know what is.
That's really interesting. It's really good insight, and I can reiterate that guerrilla marketing for documentaries is really especially when it involves social justice is the right strategy, because you, by rallying people to your cause, you can get a lot of exposition, and people are more willing to help than they would are willing to give away. Well, in order to wrap, interesting, a very interesting way to wrap things up. This is a little bit of a sample of how how the independent film industry should work. Producers and artistic team and money, everybody working together hand in hand, and in every possible scenario, coming together to not just promote the movie, but to promote the message, and to promote and to make everybody understand what is going on in the market and what opportunities are like today. And if anybody from our community is thinking of going into a project, filmmaking project, the Harvard Extension Society, the Creative Writing and Literature Students Society, did I say that right? Yes, is available. And John's email was left on the chat, and we'll make sure to leave that on the YouTube blurb. We are also here. We are a community, both in and out. Harvard Extension School is the sum of all of its parts, and we are everywhere. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you very much, John, for the time you have taken to give us your experiences in the filmmaking world and giving actionable advice to writers, producers, about every single aspect of this beautiful movie called David Mace and the media world in general today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's fun.
And yeah, we'll be in touch, everybody. Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Thank you, Gustavo.
Bye, Natalia.
And thank you, John Mayer, very much, and everyone. Goodbye.